morning, everyone, and welcome to our discussion of Prop 50 and Measure A in Santa Clara County tonight. We are very excited to have you here. The hosts are the Peninsula Democratic Coalition, Democratic Volunteer Center, and the Coast Side Dems. So thank you all for helping promote this and working with these community clubs and getting the word out. Tonight, Democrats across the state and across the country are showing great enthusiasm for resisting Trump and fighting back against his election rigging and defunding attempts. So what does that mean for your 2025 ballot? So the goal of this event is to learn about the two major issues on the ballot across the state in California and in Santa Clara County, and probably coming to a county near you if you did not have a 2025 election already happening in your county. So we want you to be well informed and advocate amongst your friends, family, and the community for these critical campaigns. We're going to start first with Assemblymember Marc Berman, and we'll be joined later by Santa Clara County Supervisor Susan Ellenberg. Many of you have written in questions about both of these campaigns, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. First, we'd like to hear from our panelist, Marc Berman. So Marc is someone who is representing Santa Clara County and San Mateo County in the state legislature. And he co-introduced this legislative package known as the Election Rigging Response Act in August. And this created Proposition 50. So he's here to tell us about it, why it's necessary and why we should support it, and of course, how to help the campaign. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you. Thanks, Gary. And thanks to the Peninsula Democratic Coalition, to the Democratic Volunteer Center, to Coast Side Dems. You know, we thought that we were going to have an off year. We thought that we'd have a little time to rest and recuperate, but democracy never rests. And that's really why we're all here tonight. And it's so amazing to see 83 people signed up so far. It's going to take that kind of an effort. So let me start off by saying, and I've said this many times, that we didn't choose this fight, and we don't even really want this fight. But with our democracy literally on the line, California cannot and will not run away from this fight. And when the dust settles on November 4th, there's not a doubt in my mind that we're going to win this fight. Now, some of you might know, I looked through the list and see some friends on here, that I have a newborn. I have a 2-month-old baby boy. And right now, you know, my wife says we're in the yes phase. We don't say no to anything. If our baby's hungry, we feed it, although not always, because then he spits up. You know, it's all about yes, yes, yes with the baby. But I know that there's going to come a time soon where I'm going to have to tell him no. He's going to ask for something unreasonable, and I'm going to have to say no. Because if I don't, he's going to grow up to be an entitled, spoiled adult. And speaking of entitled, this all started when President Donald Trump, one of the most entitled adults I've ever seen in my life, called Greg Abbott, called the governor of Texas. And he said to the governor of Texas, I'm entitled to 5 more seats. I'm entitled to 5 more Republican seats in the United States Congress. And you, Greg Abbott, I want you to go and get them for me in Texas. What an insane thing to say. What an insane thing for the president of the United States to even think that he is entitled to political representation in Congress. And the reason he's doing this is because he knows how unpopular his policies are. He knows that his big BS bill has harmed millions of Californians, has devastated communities across the country. And he knows that he can't stay in power, or he can't have a Congress that will do whatever he wants unless he rigs the system. So he called up Greg Abbott and he said, I'm entitled to 5 more seats. Now, you would think that somebody who rose to be governor of the second or third largest state in the country would be an adult. And that adult would say, no, Mr. President, you're not entitled. Just like the elections officials in Georgia in 2020 said, no, Mr. President, we will not go find you 12,000 votes so that you can stay president of the United States. That's an absolutely irresponsible demand to make. But those types of Republicans that existed in Georgia in 2020 don't exist in the United States in 2025. And so Greg Abbott obviously immediately said, yes, sir. What else could I do, sir? And that's what started this entire domino effect. And it would be different if Trump called Greg Abbott and said, hey, Greg, hey, Governor Abbott, go, rig state legislative races in Texas. I wouldn't care. As a state legislator in California, I wouldn't care if they make Texas worse. But we know that United States Congress members vote on bills that impact all Americans. And we saw that with the vote of that big BS bill, and the fact that every Republican eventually fell in line, including the Republican Congress members in California, who, rather than defend their constituents, rather than defend their communities, they do anything they could to bask in the orange glow of Mar-a-Lago for just one night. And that means clapping like seals at the circus at every terrible, damaging, ridiculous demand that President Trump makes. And so that's why when Abbott said yes and immediately put in motion the effort to do a mid-decade redistricting in Texas to steal 5 Democrat seats, we in California said we have to step up. We have to step up because this is, first off, Trump wouldn't stop at Texas. For those of you who have been around bullies, bullies only stop when this is going to sound kind of bad and a little aggressive, but bullies only stop when you punch them back in the nose. And Donald Trump is the biggest bully this country has right now. Might be one of the biggest bullies this country has ever seen, and he will only stop when he realizes that there's somebody who's willing to step up and push back against his inappropriate actions. And so we in the California legislature and in the California delegation started working on an effort to balance out the scales, to say, okay, if you're going to steal 5 seats away from marginalized communities, away from Black and brown communities in Texas, then we're gonna react in kind, and we're gonna also do a mid-decade redistricting to create 5 more Democrat seats in California. But we made it very clear that if Texas stops, if Texas does not go through with their mid-decade redistricting, then neither will California. And we had it in the language that if Texas does not move forward with their effort, California will not move forward with ours, because it is a direct reaction to what they're doing in Texas. Unfortunately, Texas did not stop. They chased down Democrats who were Democratic state legislators. They had state troopers in Texas following Democrat legislators everywhere they went, and they stopped at nothing before they accomplished their goal of rigging the elections in Texas to give Trump another 5 seats. And in such a divided Congress, that 5 seats can make all the difference in whether or not they have a majority or not. So we in California, we passed our mid-decade redistricting, but we did it in a very, very different way. So I said earlier that we're leveling the playing field. This is a direct response to what Texas did, 5 seats for 5 seats. But in California, we're respecting the Voting Rights Act. The new district boundaries were drawn very carefully and very intentionally to respect the tenets of the Voting Rights Act. We actually have, amazingly enough, we separate fewer communities in this redistricting effort than had happened in the independent redistricting that was done by the Independent Redistricting Commission in 2022. So more communities will actually stay whole in this redistricting than happened because we used a lot of the work that we did, and we consulted with the experts that advised the Independent Redistricting Committee in 2022, in 2020 and 2021. And we reviewed a lot of the conversations that they had, conversations during which they said, if we had more time, we would do X. Well, we said, okay, we have more time, so let's do X. This is something that the Independent Redistricting Commission said they thought was a good idea, so let's go ahead and do that. Our effort is temporary. And we recommit to the Independent Redistricting Commission and say that we're going to go after the 2030 census. We'll go back to our process of having the Independent Redistricting Commission. But most importantly, in contrast to Texas, and where in Texas it was the Texas legislators and governor who drew the maps and approved the maps, in California it's the voters who have the power. In California, it's the voters who are going to decide whether or not they want to move forward with the mid-decade redistricting or not. And that is such a huge contrast and difference to what they did in Texas, and I said to my Republican colleagues, I said, why are you so afraid of the voters? Why are you so afraid? All we're doing is putting it on the ballot, and we're giving all of you a say as to whether or not you want to push back on Donald Trump, and you want to create a check and a balance to the total and complete power that he's wielding in Washington, D.C. in a way that's ripping away Medi-Cal from millions of Californians, in a way that's ripping away food stamps from hundreds of thousands of Californians. Californians will get a chance to say, no, Mr. President, we think it's wrong for you to just disappear off the streets people because they look like there might be an immigrant, or because they're not speaking English. We get a chance. No, Mr. President, we think it's wrong that you're politicizing disaster aid, that you're refusing to give disaster aid to Los Angeles and the victims of the fires in January in Eaton and in the Palisades. Because you don't like California, because you're mad that California didn't vote to support you in 3 straight elections. We want voters to have the power to make that decision or not. So that's how we got to this place. It's a place that none of us thought we were going to be at 2 months ago. It's a place that none of us really want to be honest. I'd rather be spending time with my baby boy than ramping up a huge statewide operation that's going to be, truly massive in its scale. But we have to fight back. Californians have to fight back to defend our democracy and to push back against this president that will just continue taking power and continue targeting California if we don't do anything. So I want to stop there and leave plenty of time for Q&A. I've got lots of kind of Q&A in my head that I can go to, but I know that there are lots of questions that you all have already asked. So Carrie, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
That sounds great. Mark, this is such a good introduction to the whole process and really cluing us into the reason it was necessary and the implications if we hadn't done anything. And I think that's, we've received a lot of questions on that, so I'm not going to read those again. But something that you said, 2 things that really resonated with me, and I just want to underscore it. The first was you observed, the legislature that passed this observed that the Republican congressman representing California did not vote in California's best interest. I thought that was very interesting because, we do keep hoping that we're going to have representatives at least represent their constituents and take back home like the power that has been vested in them. So it's interesting to think about that. We did have one question of what's going to happen to those Republicans if this passes. So do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I really appreciate the point, Carrie. And let me emphasize to folks that I don't say this lightly. I served with 3 of California's 9 Republican Congress members in the Assembly. I personally like 2 of those 3 people. But the reality is that they are voting against the interests of their constituents. Use David Valadao as an example, who I don't know and didn't serve with, but hundreds of thousands of his constituents are going to lose Medicaid or lose Medi-Cal, our version of Medicaid. Hundreds of thousands aren't going to be able to get health insurance. What an awful, I can't imagine representing 500,000 people. I can't imagine if 200,000 of my constituents would lose something as instrumental as Medi-Cal. voting to support that. But they know that they cannot go against Donald Trump, and they're more afraid of that. They're more afraid of losing their seat than they are to a Republican primary challenger than they are of defending their constituents. And that is just a truly awful reality. And so if this passes, up to 5 of them will lose their seats. It's not a guarantee, and we'll still have to run campaigns. But there's a strong likelihood that 5 of them will lose their seats in 2026, and that will help offset the 5 Democrat seats that we're probably going to lose in Texas.
That's great, and thanks for walking us through that. I want to touch on the other thing, which is kind of another motivation for this happening, but another really important reason for those of you on the call who are looking for, like, how do I justify this? It's so different than the process we've had before. And the most important thing that you said for me tonight was the checks and balances that we usually have are not working. And so I'm thinking if we weren't going to try and check the president's overreach in some way, and this is a good way, what would happen? How far would he go? What other things would he ask for? And so I want you to speak a little bit to the urgency of providing at least some attempt to protect our boundaries.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think Governor Newsom said it great yesterday when he said we're at code red. I said in a committee hearing that we're at a fire alarm 10, which it turns out fire alarms do actually go up to 10. Usually, like 5 is terrible. A 10 is like 9/11. And we're there, and we're there because there are no longer Republicans in Congress that are willing to push back on Donald Trump, and we're there because there are no longer adults in key positions to push back against the president's worst impulses. We had some of that the first time between 2017 to 2020. You had the John McCains that would go onto the floor and say, no, we're not gonna repeal the Affordable Care Act. We don't have that anymore, and we especially don't have that. He has appointed the least qualified, most sycophantish, and I don't know if that's a word, but the biggest sycophants into these important positions. You got Kash Patel running the FBI. That guy looks like he's a kindergartner at the adult table at dinner. You've got RFK Jr. running the department, the Health and Homeland Security, doing damage that will take decades to recover from, doing damage that will kill thousands, tens of thousands of people, harm hundreds of thousands of people. So
it's so brave and important what you have done here, giving this choice to participate in fighting back and something that's relatively understandable and a small step overall, but it will be very important for our state if we're able to pull this off. So let me transition then to the next question. How do we think this is going to work? Do we think we have polls yet, or?
Well, it's gonna work when everybody on this call signs up to volunteer for a phone shift, signs up to volunteer for a canvassing shift. And let me tell you how cool of an opportunity this is. I bet that 90% of the people on this call have traveled to other parts of California to volunteer, have traveled to other states to go knock on doors, have made phone calls into other parts of the state, because usually, our races in the Bay Area are they're not gerrymandered, but we know what the result's going to be because we have a lot of Democrats in the Bay Area. And so people like myself aren't terribly vulnerable when it comes to our reelections. In this election, that doesn't matter. In this election, your vote, your neighbor's vote, your dentist's vote, your postman's vote, postperson's vote is just as important as votes in Bakersfield or votes in, the Inland Empire or Orange County. And so we can just focus on our backyard, and we got to drive up the turnout. We got to drive up the turnout in the Bay Area. This is, largely going to be a base election where Democrats are going to vote yes and Republicans are going to vote no. And I think we'll get a majority of the independents, but we got to turn them out. It's a special election, and you and me, Carrie, we live and eat and breathe this stuff. But the reality is, a lot of our neighbors and friends and family are just trying to get by every day. And so,
A member on this call, I believe that ballot will be coming directly to our homes. So
that's right. Everybody's going to get a ballot in the mail. We're making it as easy as possible for you to participate in your democracy and make sure that your voice is heard. And so it is so important for all of us to literally become just precinct captains of our area, and go dominate our neighborhood and make sure that everybody knows about it. You can sign up with the California Democratic Party to get plugged in to a lot of the different volunteer opportunities. And let me tell you, I know we've got Art and Wine Festival still happening. We got, if anyone here on is from Pacifica, we got the Pacifica Fog Fest. We got the Half Moon Bay. We got the, oh shucks, I'm blanking on the name of the Pumpkin Fest. There are a lot of community events where we need to get farmers markets. We got to be everywhere to make sure that people know about Prop 50 and Measure A in Santa Clara County, and that they vote for, that they actually check yes for both of those.
it's such an actionable way to fight back. It's something very tangible, and a lot of people have felt so desperate and sad since Trump took office again. And this is such a really a gift in a way for us to be able to send a very clear and loud message that, the people are still in control.
1,000%. You nailed it.
Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better.
So we've got 100 people on the call and another 200 that are going to have registered to receive the video. Of course, we've got the organizations represented here as well. We'll get the word out. Let's educate the folks that are on the call, and we'll watch the video about like how it works. So what are the downsides? We've heard a lot about the upsides. What are people worried about, and what is our response to that?
Yeah, I think there's some folks, myself included, there's a little uncomfortability with this. We pride ourselves on the good governance reforms that California has led the way on. I think a lot of us, when we passed the Independent Redistricting Commission back in, I think, 2008, hoped that more and more states would adopt it. But in reality, what we've seen is in a lot of Republican states, they've actively stopped that from happening. They've risen the voter threshold for these to pass. They've made it harder to put these initiatives on the ballot. And the reality is that we are living and playing in a system that's very tilted. And even that, we were willing to say, okay, as long as you're doing it every 10 years with the census and the usual, process, fine. If you don't have an independent redistricting commission like California and you still gerrymander your districts, que sera, whatever will be, will be. But the fact that Donald Trump called Texas Governor Abbott and demanded that they do a mid-decade, they don't have any societal norms that they abide by. The only thing that they care about is the pursuit of power. And so there comes a point where you have to say enough is enough. And you have to say, okay, I'm no longer going to fight with a hand tied behind my back. I'm no longer going to bring a butter knife to a gunfight. I'm going to push back. And I'm going to push back in defense of my constituents. I'm going to push back in defense of my state. Everyone on this call knows that Donald Trump just has California as the number one target of communities to constantly damage and demean and do as much harm as he possibly can. Sorry, I keep on looking that way because my wife and my baby are unhappy with me. And so, but so there comes a point where we have to stand up for our constituents. And the fact that Donald Trump sent his national police force to Gavin Newsom's event in Los Angeles, to a political event. He sent ICE agents. It's all about intimidation. And I truly do not believe that he will stop. Period. I don't think he will stop.
Unless we stop him.
Unless we stop him.
And just to be clear to everyone on the call, we are talking about peaceful, legal, nonviolent ways of reclaiming our power. This is really important, and I want to tie in one of the things you said to some of my background, and then I noticed that Supervisor Ellenberg has joined us. We'll bring her on before you have to leave. But one of the things you said was, reminded me how lucky we are in California to have a lot of voter protections and so much encouragement for people to participate. But other states have really actively rigged their districting process in ways that we here would never have imagined. So they close down voting centers. They prevent people from being able to vote on the weekends and early, and they have even made whole counties, hours across, have almost no voting centers. So they're doing a lot of things to try and rig it. And they have been for years. This is the latest power grab, and we really haven't gotten involved in other states before, but we're paying the price in terms of what Congress is giving up and the kinds of crazy or non-traditional people that are being appointed to the cabinet secretary positions and things like that. So we really do need to understand that no one else is going to stand up for us. It's time for us to take action. So I think it's really valuable what you're doing.
What you said is such a good point. I actually spent a summer when I was in college interning in the voting section of the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department in DC, and that was the division that where you'd have to get clearance. Communities that fell under the jurisdiction of the Voting Rights Act would have to get pre-clearance to make elections changes to make sure that those changes wouldn't negatively impact historically marginalized communities in these different states. And that doesn't exist anymore because, and something we haven't really talked about, the Supreme Court gutted it. The Supreme Court absolutely destroyed Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which was what prescribed these processes. And that's another point is we can't trust that there's that backstop either. There's literally no backstop to the constantly encroaching presidential powers that Trump and his cronies, I don't know how else to put it, when you see other things like this TikTok deal today, will constantly try to use to get more power and to get more money. And so yes, it's awful what's happening in other states, but we have an opportunity to fight back. Everyone on this call.
All right, one last quick flash answer, and then I would love to bring in Susan and to hear your thoughts on Measure A before we transition over to her. We're getting a lot of questions about, is 5 enough? Are we going to actually be able to achieve our goal if we pass this? So any quick thoughts on that?
I don't know. But I'll tell you, 5 is better than none. 5 is better than none. And I assure you that even if California didn't do what we're doing, Trump still would have gone to Missouri. He still would have gone to Indiana. He still would have gone to Florida. And he still would have demanded that all those states get him more seats because that's what he does. That's who he is. And that's all he knows. And so I tell you, I like our odds a lot better with an extra 5 Democrat seats in California than if we don't pass Prop 50.
Me too. So we're going to add a spotlight for Supervisor Ellenberg, who has just joined us. And I know, Mark, that you're about to leave and do family time, which is very, very important, and we applaud you for that. Is there anything you'd like to say as we move our conversation over to the Measure A section?
Gotta pass Measure A, and Measure A and Prop 50 are pretty inextricably linked. In fact, when I was presenting Prop 50, or I think it was Assembly Constitutional Amendment 8 in the Elections Committee, one of my Republican colleagues kept on asking me, how much will it cost? How much will it cost? How much will it cost? And I finally told him, I said, it's going to cost a hell of a lot less than the damage that's being done to Santa Clara County and 2/3 of the constituents that I represent, where the damage that was done by this big BS bill is going to blow a over $1 billion hole in Santa Clara County, in Santa Clara County's budget. Santa Clara County and Supervisor Ellenberg can speak, much more intelligently than I can to this, but has one of the biggest hospital systems in the state, and it's where our most struggling constituents go to get their healthcare services. And the big beautiful bill is going to blow $1 billion hole in it, I believe, over the next something like 5 or 10 years. And that's why the supervisors had to put Measure A on the ballot. And so this goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is the decisions that these elected officials, that these Republicans, it was all Republicans, are making that are just damaging and destroying our communities and our constituents. And my Republican colleagues shut up real fast when I made that point. And so I'm super grateful to Supervisor Ellenberg for leading the effort on Measure A, which is going to be critical for hundreds of thousands of our constituents in Santa Clara County. And we got to get out and pass yes on 50 and yes on A. It's real simple.
Wonderful. Thank you so much,
Two
Assemblymember.
sides of the same coin. I want to thank Assemblymember Berman. The state is fighting like hell against Trump by putting Prop 50. We are fighting against HR1 by putting Measure A on. And I hope that all of you watching see every level of your government really working to take back our power.
Absolutely.
All right, Mark, you are off the hook. Those with general questions, we'll get those at the end, and we're going to shift over now to a more proper introduction for Supervisor Ellenberg. All right, so our next panelist is Santa Clara County Supervisor Susan Ellenberg, who is going to speak here about the impacts of the big and not so beautiful HR1 on California counties. And Santa Clara County is working specifically in 2025 to mitigate the worst harms of Measure A. And those of you who don't live in this county, I encourage you to stay on and listen to the whole background of what's happening and why it's happening and what the benefits are, because I suspect other counties are going to have to follow suit. We're not the only ones suffering harm from HR1.
Thank you so much, and really delighted to be here, Carrie. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you so much. In what might be a little bit of a surprise, and I'll explain why I'm doing it, I'm going to take just the first minute and the first slide to share a little bit of the progress that I have been fortunate enough to lead on or have a hand in over the past 7 years. And I'm doing that not simply for the flex of the work that I am proud of, but to show you some of the things that are absolutely at stake. And then we'll go into more detail. So I've had the opportunity to lead in a number of significant areas as a member of the Board of Supervisors, and just wanted to highlight the impact that we have had in what I call the children's agenda in addressing mental health, homelessness prevention, housing supports, and of course, expanded access to childcare. Moving more specifically to preventing and ending homelessness, while I wasn't a member of the Board of Supervisors that proposed the 2016 Measure A, I have had the opportunity to shepherd through all $950 million. We have overperformed in Measure A, funding more than 6,000 permanent supportive housing units, ending homelessness for more than 17,000 people, 56 projects across 11 of our cities. This has been really significant and meaningful work. And finally, the third point that I'll share is that in January of 2022, Supervisor Lee joined with me in declaring mental illness, serious mental illness and substance use disorders, a public health crisis in our county. And that had the effect of vaulting this issue really to the very top of the county's agenda. And since then, we have expanded our bed inventory by nearly 130. We've added workforce. We're adding substance use and addiction clinics, both inpatient and outpatient services. And really all I want to do is keep focusing on this work and other vital projects and making an impact and serving my community. But most of that good work is being derailed. So this one big, beautiful, alleged beautiful bill that was passed no less into law on July 4th, gotta love that, will put into effect $1 trillion in cuts over the next 10 years to vital safety net services, the biggest of which is Medicaid. These are services that have now been in place for decades that we have come to expect as part of the federal government's obligation to help us in local government care for people who, for a variety of reasons, are just unable to live self-sustainably or self-sufficiently for some period of time. Our county, for the last number of years, has received $3.5 billion in federal funding annually. That's over a quarter of our budget. And important to note that counties, people sometimes don't think about this, we are administrative arms of the state. A lot of what we do with the dollars we receive is that we pass through from the federal government and the state government very specifically targeted funds to provide specific services. Of that $3.5 billion that we've been receiving, $2.5 billion of it has been specifically to Medicaid reimbursements. Why this volume of Medicaid reimbursements? Let's talk about that. County's core mandate is healthcare to the indigent, full stop, regardless of their insurance, their status, their citizenship. We take that mandate, obviously, very seriously. For decades, Santa Clara Valley Healthcare consisted of a number of local health clinics in different neighborhoods throughout the county and the flagship hospital, Valley Medical Center. That hospital, Valley Medical, received revenue in exchange, in payment for care, predominantly from Medicaid, but also from Medicare, more recently from Obamacare, covered California, Medi-Cal expansions, and then, of course, some portion of private commercial insurance. That was fine. We were operating the hospital. The general fund provided a subsidy every year because operating a hospital for the public is not profitable. In fact, even when we are getting full Medicaid reimbursements, it doesn't represent the full cost of care. And then in 2019, Verity, a private hedge fund which owned numerous hospitals, declared bankruptcy. Two of the hospitals that they owned were O'Connor, which they had only recently bought from Daughters of Charity, and St. Louis Hospital in South County. Those hospitals were on their way to being closed, sold for parts, repurposed. We knew at the county that if those two hospitals closed, number one, there would be no comprehensive hospital in the south part of our county, and two, the closure of O'Connor would absolutely overwhelm Valley Medical Center. So the board, again, this is a little bit before I got there, in 2018, started talking about the possibility of our county buying those two hospitals out of bankruptcy. We were the only bidder in bankruptcy. So this is not a question of should the public sector operate the hospitals or the private sector. This was a question of, do we lose access to these hundreds of beds, or does the public hospital system step in to preserve that access? We stepped in, again, the only bidder. We did not need to go to the voters. We did not need to ask for a tax. We were able to purchase those hospitals. And in fact, we now had some economies of scale and were able to get better deals with vendors to make more efficient purchases. And we received a higher rate of Medicaid reimbursement, kind of whatever the inverse is of a volume discount. Again, these hospitals were all at capacity, bringing in revenue, being subsidized by the general fund to make up for some of that difference. We're now a 3-hospital system. Then in 2024, Regional Medical Center, which was owned by HCA, Hospital Corporation of America, largest for-profit hospital owner conglomerate in the country, started closing many of their hospitals. And in Santa Clara County, they started cannibalizing Regional Medical Center, which means in medical terms, they started closing one department after another that wasn't making money. First, they closed labor and delivery. Then they reduced the severity of trauma, heart attack, and stroke, to which they would respond. Those are high-level specialties, expensive care. And meanwhile, as they are closing down expensive specialty care, they were expanding their emergency room. They were doubling it in size because emergency rooms can function as sort of a catch and release. People come in by ambulance, they are triaged, they're served, the hospital gets paid, and then they are farmed out somewhere else for the more expensive specialty care. It's, I think, an insidious model. It is a business model. Again, the county could see our 3 hospitals are operating at capacity, losing the anchor hospital for East San Jose because they were going to continue to close departments. They were hemorrhaging doctors and nurses and medical staff. They were sending more and more patients to us, which was again starting to overwhelm our system. Here we are again, thinking about whether it makes sense to purchase this hospital. We're already providing care to most of their patients because they are Medicaid patients. And HCA, the regional ownership, was charging us a much higher premium to treat their patients than we would charge and collect if we were serving them ourselves. So again, the board was asked to make a decision. I'll note from an infrastructure perspective also, regional is a fantastic building, seismically upgraded, really good bones, and we to try to build anything of that comparable size and quality, I can tell you it would take 10 years and cost 10 times as much. We made what I have been told by numerous appraisers was a very lowball offer for Regional Medical Center. They took it so fast. They could not wait to get out of a system where they were hemorrhaging money. So the only reason that we own 4 hospitals is because the private sector failed us. They weren't making money. They pulled out. Clearly, nobody else wanted to buy these hospitals because they were not making money. The sale for O'Connor and St. Louis closed in April of 2019. Just imagine with me for a moment where our community would have been if we were 2 hospitals short 10 months later. Obviously, we didn't know that, but I'm going to take some credit for it anyway. And that is why we own 4 hospitals. Please note that we didn't have to go to the voters. We did not have a tax. We didn't need extra funding for any of those purchases or for those operations. The only thing that changed was the bottom fell out of Medicaid. Even when Trump was elected and was talking about things he was going to cut, he said, Medicaid will be safe. Medicaid was even fairly safe through the House review of H.R. 1. When this got to the Senate, just days before it was passed, was when the really, really draconian cuts came in. So this was unexpected entirely, but it has changed everything for us. What I also want you to know is the magnitude of our healthcare system. We see 80%, we treat 80% of the traumas in the entire county. There are only 3 trauma centers in our county. We own and operate 2 of them in San Jose. The 3rd is in Palo Alto. If you are being picked up by an ambulance, it is an 80% likelihood that you are being brought to one of Valley Medical's hospitals. We are the trauma centers for heart attack, for stroke, for spinal cord injury, for traumatic brain injury, for burn care. We are one of only 3 regional burn centers between Los Angeles and the Oregon border. While we serve on a daily basis many patients who have Medicaid insurance, we serve the entire county for high-level trauma. We also train more than a quarter of the residents that practice anywhere in our county. We provide the only locked psychiatric emergency facility. Every 15 minutes, an ambulance arrives at one of our hospitals. We are your trauma providers, regardless of who your insurance is, regardless of where your primary care doctor works. The other thing I want to say about access is that when people lose their insurance, they cannot get care from their primary doctor, the well child checkup, early intervention care. The only place they can get care is in an emergency room. For public and private hospitals alike, if somebody presents themselves at an emergency room, they have to be given life-saving care. What will happen in the private hospitals is that care will be provided. It will be uncompensated. And while the county has the general fund subsidy to help balance that a little bit, these hospitals don't have that. They will look then to raise their rates on the patients that can pay. They will charge more. The insurance companies will then increase their premiums. We will pay more. Not only will private insurance, commercial insurance providers pay more, our access is going to be diminished. With more people in emergency rooms, waits will be longer, and ambulance service will be slower because ambulances can't simply drop somebody at the door. They have to wait for bed availability before they can go out on another call. Please know, again, regardless of where you live in the county, regardless of your insurance, you will be impacted by this. The Hospital Council, that's the coalition that our hospitals are a part of, and the privates, Stanford Children's, Sutter, El Camino, Good Sam, Kaiser, and I may have forgotten someone, but that membership organization has endorsed Measure A because they know that we are all symbiotically connected. And to the extent that our system contracts in any way, loses doctors, closes specialty centers, closes an emergency room, they will become overwhelmed. They do not want that. And they don't necessarily want our patient mix. Again, different business model. So please know that we have their support for Measure A. How is the county responding to this $1 billion ongoing hole? And that means billion each year. 3 primary strategies. 1, reducing costs and looking to increase revenue. This is going to happen county-wide, not only in the hospital system, but across everything we do. And yes, everyone should always be operating at our highest levels of efficiencies. What has happened, though, what we've been able to do with funding is really expand innovative programs, pilot programs, use Medicaid reimbursements for social determinants of health, like temporary housing and food access. That's what is going to be cut back. The expanded mental health services, the addiction services, the homelessness outreach, those are things that are going to be impacted, both in part because they are Medicaid reimbursed to some degree. They also are general fund funded by some degree. And the general fund, which means your local property taxes, are going to shift to backfill Medicaid because, again, that is our primary mandate. So general fund that don't have their own federal or state mandates are going to be shifted away from the services that all of our cities count on us to provide. The second thing we're going to be doing or already doing is working with the California Public Association of Hospitals to work with the governor and the legislature on some protections for public hospitals. We had one protection on the ballot in the last election, Prop 35, which passed, which was set to deliver about $30 million to us. That's one of the many, many things that HR 1, the big hideous bill, rendered moot. That's not happening. The third strategy, of course, is Measure A. This is a temporary 5-year, 5/8 cent sales tax, general tax, that will help us backfill some of the losses. It would generate about $330 million a year. So that is in no way a full fix for what we need. Let me anticipate just a couple of questions about the tax. Why is it a sales tax? Because it is a sales tax because that is literally the only revenue increasing tool that the county has. We only have the authority to do a sales tax that is countywide. So unlike cities, we can't choose what kind of taxes we want. We have specific authority for this. So that is what we are doing. It is a general tax, but it will be spent toward helping us backfill some of the voluminous holes that we have. All right, I will stop. You might have more questions that I'm not preempting. So let's go right to that.
Oh, you're welcome to show that a little longer if you want to.
No, it's all right. It's fine. I'm happy to be here. And thank you. I know that goes on for a long time. There's so much information and so little that people know about the county health system.
Yeah, you're obviously an expert on this, and I think a lot of people have learned a lot from that presentation. So, for me specifically, I didn't realize uh, how central the counties are in, distributing and connecting with these funding programs that are happening at the federal level, right? I understand these are bills that are passing, but I didn't really understand the mechanism for how that money gets out to our counties. And I think, you know, not only is it interesting to learn about it and realize quite how much we depend on our county leadership to provide and distribute those funds, but also, right, the leadership that our county has been able to like step up and do it quickly. Whereas I suspect other counties are going to have to wait till 2026 or later to start figuring out how to deal with this. So my first question is, we have quite a few people here from San Mateo County and possibly some other counties. I invited people outside of Santa Clara to join as well. I'm hoping that maybe 60 seconds of what do you think that you would give advice to people in other counties, activists, on how to get ahead of this, and what have you learned in this process?
As soon as HR1 was passed into law, we knew that we had a fiscal emergency on our hands. An advantage that we had over other counties turned out to be an advantage. I hadn't seen it that way earlier. Was that because the assessor resigned midway through his term, we had to have a special election because it was more than 120 days, blah blah. But because we had that election already happening, we were able to move very, very quickly to get this tax onto the ballot. This didn't need the same kind of outreach and engagement that you would normally expect around spending plans because there's no new spending. There's no, goodies for this city and we'll invest here. This is to keep emergency rooms open, to keep our hospitals functioning, to make sure that we could save lives. So we did move very quickly. I suspect you're going to see a lot of revenue measures put on by counties in 2026. I can tell you that they are looking to us to see whether we can be successful.
I think it's huge. I think it's really, as I mentioned with Mark, the connection here is not only are we responding to bad policies from Trump, but we're also showing a lot of bravery in fighting back and finding ways to protect the services that we've come to know and love in our areas, in our home. I would say the thing that has resonated the most with me on Measure A has been these trauma centers that are, our goal is to provide these services to the county, but we know not every county has what we have, and that many people from the region need to visit our trauma centers. Do you find that is something that's resonating with people, or is it the load on the private hospitals that's being transferred to us? What do you think is the most resonant message that you want people here to take out to their community?
The access that even if your insurance is not being implicated or jeopardized in any way, you will feel the impacts of any contraction of our system. It will stress the other hospitals. It will stress our remaining services. And that is dangerous. That risks lives because the work that we do, the care that we provide for the population at large, regardless of insurance and inclusive of high-end commercial, are those most life-saving skills. You're not anticipating a car accident, a major stroke, a traumatic burn. These really horrible things are addressed in county facilities for everyone. And that to me is just really critical. This is not what you want to compromise on.
We got a technical question in here that I don't know the answer to, and you probably know. So Lisa wants to know, how can we be certain that Measure A will go to healthcare funding because it's not a special tax measure that requires the majority vote, the different kind of measure you were talking?
Yeah, I understand. Again, because of the math, the size of the hole, it is $1 billion, and this only covers a third of it. And because our primary mandate, what are required to do is provide health care to the indigent. So to the extent that we can bring in new dollars to do that, we can preserve our current general fund dollars to do the other work that we do in not only, mental health and homelessness outreach, but public safety. Our general fund covers the bulk of the budgets for the sheriff, the district attorney, the jail, custody health, the public defender. Those are general fund services. So we have to shore up our healthcare, and without any additional dollars, it is more dollars from the general fund and more compromises to other services.
Steve just would like to say he's got his yes on a sign. Where can other people get one? And of course, also yes on 50 signs. So we'll see if we can get that answer for you. But right now we got the Measure A here.
Yes. So if you're asking how to get involved, first of all, to the extent I'm preaching to the choir, awesome. I need you to become the army. This is very close, very, very close. And the repercussions and risks are just tremendous. You can go to saveourlocalhospitals.com and you can sign up to volunteer. We do phone banking 4 nights a week. Mondays, it's a virtual phone bank. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's at the Labor Council on Zanker. We do walks on Saturdays and Sundays, starting on Zanker as well. I am doing dozens and dozens of kind of house parties and neighborhood group meetings across my district. If you are in Campbell, Santa Clara, you're probably not on this call because you're Peninsula. I'm doing a couple in my colleagues' districts, but I don't want to step on their toes. But ask my colleagues to come and talk to your group of neighbors or a neighborhood association or a chamber of commerce or a business. We need to get to everybody, and we need your help to do that. Post a sign, wear a button, do all the things. Talk about this, tell your friends, email your list. And if you are not part of the choir yet and you still have questions, first of all, I'll stay as long as Carrie will allow me to. But email me, email the campaign, ask your questions. If you have the question, 100 other people do as well. And they're real. There are legitimate concerns, and I want to address them.
Absolutely. All right, we got 2 in the chat right now that I'm looking at that are people have heard some things on Nextdoor, or their friend is like,
Yep.
Healthcare is okay, but housing's a real issue. What are the best ways to kind of push back on that? Like Nextdoor, you don't always know exactly who the person is, but they are part of your community. Do we just send them the link to the website?
I don't want to advise how to engage on Nextdoor. I find that it can become very toxic very quickly. Someone right now insisting that everything I said to the Century Club last week was a lie and inaccurate. If you want to go through those things verbally, happy to tell you what each thing I said was correct and provide the receipts. I'm not going to do the back and forths on social media. I think it's disastrous. But people have their own issues. What I can tell you is, and my grandfather, I'm sure everybody's grandfather said this, sweetie, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. So literally, we must save lives to do anything else. And is housing part of quality of life? Of course. Is transit? Yes. Is climate? Yes. I'm not ranking these issues. Well, I guess I am. I mean, to some extent, they are all connected, but literally, you cannot do anything if you are dead. So we would like you to not be dead. We would like to save your life should you need life-saving care.
I think that's great. I would add that I think Stacy asked this question. So to answer that question, I would say that one of the number one reasons that people become homeless is when they do lose their health, when they do have problems that prevent them from continuing to work and things like that. So it is all interconnected. Exactly.
We're going to see more homelessness, I suspect, because there will be more medical debt. People who do go to that emergency room without insurance, they will still receive a bill. It is important to know that if you receive it from the county, it also comes with a form for a waiver and support and help, and we don't report it to your credit union. I don't know that the privates have quite the same indulgent system, but people will go into medical debt, and that will impact your ability to maintain your housing as well. And yes, there will be sicker people amongst us, people who didn't get an immunization and didn't have access to primary care. There will be people walking around sicker. We saw this during the pandemic. We are, again, all connected, regardless of somebody's status, legal, race, anything. If they are here, you want them to be healthy because you want yourself to be healthy. This is both a completely altruistic action and a completely selfish one. Protect yourself by protecting others.
I love it. Last question, and then we'll wrap up. We structured this, I guess you guys structured this in such a way that it has a time boundary. Do you think that's an important point to get across? What do you want to say about that?
We wanted to be crystal clear that we are tying this revenue ask to the current situation. And despite the fact that it feels very doomy and gloomy right now, my fervent hope, and I'll tell you why I believe this, is that half a decade from now, the circumstances will be different. And in part, I believe that because I think so much is going to go to shit in the next number of years across the country, because there are plenty of counties and cities and states that are not working to take care of their residents like we are, that will see hospital closures, that will see people turned away from care, that will see sicker communities, more people dying. And at some point, even the Republicans have to say, oh my God, that's enough. So I really do believe, unfortunately, it's going to have to get awful in many parts of our country, but this cannot hold. You cannot not take care of people. So the 5 years is our best attempt to say, this is what we think we need. And we've got to have other models in place by then.
Well, I'm so grateful that you and the other supervisors were able to pull this together, get it on the ballot, put it out there. You're running an amazing campaign and showing a lot of guts as a great example, as you mentioned, for other counties who may wish to move forward on this. We have put the links to the Save Our Local Hospitals website up.
And could I make an ask to the electeds that are here? I mean, we want everyone's endorsements, but we know if you are elected to public office, you have a platform, a pulpit, you have people that listen to you. Please, please endorse Measure A. Stand for saving people's lives. Stand with us against the Trump administration telling us that we can't take care of people. We can and we will. And we need every single one of you to be with us.
How do they do that? Do they do that on the website?
On the website, saveourlocalhospitals.com, you can look at the endorsement page to see who has already endorsed and scroll down to the bottom and say, yes, add my name.
That's wonderful. And I do encourage everyone to do it. I've endorsed, and we have asked a lot of our friends to do it. So that's also an advocacy you can do, whether you live here or not. You probably know somebody in political office or a level of influence in Santa Clara County. So that would be really helpful and help get the word out as well. We only have a few weeks left before ballots are dropping.
Ballots come out on October 6th. We want people to vote quickly, early. A favorite candidate trick. It's not really a trick, but a lot of people don't seem to know it. Once your ballot is received by the registrar, you get off of every mailing list, every phone call list. So if you do not want to be overwhelmed by the mail, and it will come for Prop 50, for the assessor, and for Measure A, turn your ballot in. You don't have to study it for a long time. It's 3 items. And when you're talking with your neighbors who are lamenting the mail or the robocalls, please tell them, turn their ballot in. It also saves all of the campaign's money that we don't have to spend on trying to reach you if we know you've voted.
That's a great tip. I love it. All right. I hope we have been able to answer everybody's questions, but I just want to say thank you so much to Supervisor Ellenberg for joining us and for giving us an amazing, detailed, and helpful explanation of how the counties work with the federal funding and how these major bills that are passing in Washington can affect us so many thousands of miles away in a really significant and dangerous way. How these things are related. We've got to fix Congress so they don't keep robbing our counties and our people of their health care services. We're really grateful you came and hope everybody can get involved in helping to save these services in their counties as well.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody. Really appreciate you.
I just want to thank our speakers, Assemblymember Marc Berman, Santa Clara County Supervisor Susan Ellenberg, and of course our amazing team who helped pull this together, Lawrence Bird and Bruce Hanna from the DVC, Pam Salvatierra from the DVC, and Karina Merrick, and of course Lori Holtzberg from the PDC and our co-sponsor, the Coastside Dems. So thank you to all of you who joined us today, and you'll be able to find a video of this to share with your friends and with your community on our PDC and DVC websites in the near term. We'll follow up with an email to everybody who registered and send the link. Thank you so much. Good night.